So I got a little busy last week, so I didn't have time to cover episode 3 when it came out, so I watched episodes 3 and 4 back to back, and holy shit, I'm not sure if it was just because of the content within the episodes, or if it's just because watching 2 episodes back to back of Sakugan is just that much fun, but that was some of the more entertaining content I've seen this season. From last week's episode with this daughter really pushing and I think putting them in some of the greatest danger that they've seen, if not the greatest danger they've seen. When the smartest person in the room is also a child, they're bound to think they're smarter than they are, which then in returns makes it so, well, a father who has experience in going through these caves kind of like ostracized and they almost get killed because of it. To then introducing a best girl who's basically Faye Valentine. Ever since the kind of trailer that Crunchyroll, I think it was like the actual official trailer or trailer 2, I mean, the comments pretty much, they wrote themselves. Everyone was pointing out the scene in the bar when he like pretty much gets a nosebleed towards this girl. And she definitely lived up to my expectations, and I'm very interested to see what type of a foil she'll be, because I kind of feel like it'll be a kind of frenemy dynamic, because, well, you can't have someone like him dying since he owes you $1 million, but at the same time, you're gonna be okay putting his balls in a vice. Like, that's kind of the impression she gives me. So, between these 2 episodes, the best of Sakugan, hands down. One of the things that I think when watching a show like this, there's probably going to be a divide among what people think of the daughter. Because when you look at, say, episode 3, she very much believes she's the smartest because she got into college when she was like 6 to 8 years old, right? She's clearly intelligent, no one can deny that, but she's also very immature. She thinks she's the best adult in the room, and that what she thinks is always going to be a-okay. And throughout episode 3, you can tell the difference of experience meets book smart, because her book smarts is telling her, we can make all these different tunnels and caverns, and ultimately we'll be able to get to the destination quicker. Where you have the experience, which is the father, saying, hey, we're gonna do it safe, because my instincts tell me that this is how we'll do it. He even recognizes before those creatures pop up that they will pop up, he just wasn't expecting it that quickly, because of what she did with like tunneling through that ultimately created an almost earthquake by the looks of it, and just everything kind of went to shit. If it wasn't for her dad, she would have lost all of her equipment, all of her personal belongings outside of the amulet with the map on it, and really she would have died in that container. And it's interesting because we haven't reached the point where she's kind of evolved and said, yeah, I've been a dumb kid, and yeah, I may be smart, but it's not like I can't listen to people with more experience. She didn't reach that, and she didn't get punished for her outlandish behavior last week, but that's something that's going to be the journey over this season. And one of 2 things I think is going to happen. Either A, she's going to lose her father, either because of her own ignorance, or because he sacrifices himself for her, which ultimately will then hopefully evolve her character to be more mature. Or 2, there will be something similar like a life or death situation, and luckily he'll survive, but because she listened, she'll learn how to grow up, sort of a thing. Either way, it's something that if you didn't have that type of dynamic, that type of drama, then it would be too easy of a journey. And most of the time, an easy journey for father and daughter stories, if they're going the typical slice of life, perfectly acceptable because, well, they're not battling monsters, they're not going through deep, dark, dangerous caverns. No, they're sitting at home cooking, learning to cook, or you get like stuff like Sweetness and Lightning where it's, it's just a single father and things like that. This, you need that type of like arrogance, that big-headed nature, because you can understand how she got that way. But at the same time, she's going to have to learn that she has to trust more and more, even if, her father is chasing tail and getting into $1 million debts. And I love how she actually said that. She straight up calls it chasing tail, and I'm like, holy shit, do never change. Though I will say, the names in this show, I cannot say without, like, slowing it down. Like, the whole idea of, like, Memempu and, like, all the names, they're just impossible. Like, I can break it down easy, like Zach as an example, like, who's basically Faye Valentine in my opinion. But father, daughter, Zach, that's how we're going to stick with these reviews, because I can say it on the fly without having to be like, wait, let's check my notes here, sort of a thing. Episode 4, I think, out of the 2 was my favorite, personally, because it pretty much gave me a Cowboy Bebop feel. Not to the same degree of Cowboy Bebop with the space cowboy, things like that, no. But there's elements that very much gave me like, okay, this reminds me of Cowboy Bebop if it was a little more goofy, so to speak. And Cowboy Bebop can be goofy, but you can definitely tell a different level of goofiness when you watch a show like Sakugan. The entire bar scene with him trying to pick up women, I think he failed a dozen times, 13 if you count our girl here, because he pretty much used the same line over and over, and the drunker he got, no matter what happened, he never got better at it. And when it came to the kind of like shakedown with the mob, I always love those when the mobs come in to collect debt, whether it's the main characters you're following or characters you just got introduced to. And you could tell she was a player. She was listening in while they were basically eating pizza and things like that. So you knew she was going to be no good, but it didn't change the fact that you were probably excited to see what she was going to be up to. She comes in like a badass on her motorcycle and pretty much gets shaken down by the mob and uses our boy to basically deflect and be a human meat shield. And while he was actually doing pretty good, because he got arrested at the start of this episode because of all the bullshit he was causing, which honestly, I'm hoping that, the end of this episode isn't going to pile on, because he really didn't cause that. You can understand the punishment of how, like, they basically crumbled and it pretty much looks like a terrorist attack on what is basically Italy. We have, like, the Colosseum and everything like that. So I'm hoping that, him basically just fighting for his life from a mob isn't going to get him even more trouble, which it probably will. But the fact that he didn't have his gun in his possessions, he was actually doing some pretty good hand-to-hand combat until, like, I don't know what type of steroids this one dude was taking, but he pretty much looked like he was, I don't know, probably like Wilson Fisk, like something like that from Spider-Man. I'm just like, what in the actual hell? Looks like he could probably grab you by your entire skull with one hand and just smack you down. So just to see like the escalation and the goofiness and the silliness and the literal life or death situation. I mean, had she not popped up there and demanded 1 million, he would have been tortured to death. And I think that's what makes it so interesting for the long term, because very early on, many people, myself included, were looking within the first couple episodes. The father dying is a very real possibility. Look how the first episode ends, right? So even though it was presented in a humorous / twisted way, torturing to death is a very real possibility had we not been introduced to this new character, Zach, within this episode. Sure, you could argue he never would have been in that situation had he not met her, but let's just say somehow misunderstanding, and he still ended up there. There's no way she would have been able to save his life. Like, maybe, because you could look at the end of the episode with the whole motorcycle, but that still was because the motorcycle is there. So it's one of those things that you have to keep in mind, that character death or very big life or death situations, whether it's episode 3 with her in the container, those like scorpion looking creatures about to rip her body apart, to the literal shakedown of a gang mafia, right? There's a lot of uncertainties in life or death situations while being kind of surrounded by this kind of like comfy blanket of energy that's just making you say, this is cute, this is funny, this is silly. And then when bad shit truly does happen, you're kind of like, oh shit, yeah, I kind of glossed over that. And that's what's part of the fun of Sakugan, and clearly one of the most underappreciated series, I think, of this season, hands down. I mean, I was beating myself over the head with not being able to talk about last week's episode when it came out, but I was just so busy. But honestly, watching both of these back to back was definitely a very entertaining experience, and I'm thinking when the show does wrap up, I'm going to rewatch it probably within 1 or 2 nights in terms of like settings there, because it does feel like in a binge, you definitely will get a different energy than the weekly. The weekly will make you think a bit more, but that binge will give you a very cosmetic kind of chaotic energy, which I'm really interested in seeing again. But of course, as always, let me know your thoughts and feelings, whether it's on last week's episode, this latest one, the new character we got introduced to. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and subscribe if you're new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.